Hello. My God, really? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet again another video. And as you can see by the title and the thumbnail, it's that time yet again. We're going to be grading each team's trade deadline. This should be quite a fun video. As you can tell, we got all the teams here in alphabetical order. So, we're ready to go. We've obviously also done this into 5 different tiers. We got the A tier, which means you had the best trade deadline. You have the B tier, the C tier, the D tier, and then you have the F tier, which means you had the worst trade deadline. So this should be a fun video. But if you haven't already, make sure to go subscribe down below. I would greatly appreciate it. And anyways, we will get into this video. So starting off with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, with Anaheim, this deadline, didn't have that many moves to make, to be honest with you. Really, the only moves that I could see them making were really on that blue line side, and that's what they did. They obviously traded away John Klingberg, that being their biggest trade of the deadline, most likely. But apart from that, really, they didn't do too much of anything else, really. And I didn't expect them to. I expected them to kind of stay the same that they were. But Klingberg was obviously the one guy that I expected, for the Ducks to move 100%. So we're gonna put the Ducks in C tier. To be honest with you, I think that's a pretty fitting place. They didn't really do too much, but the Klingberg trade, they didn't get a lot back in return. Not as much as people may have expected. But when you look at Klingberg's stats, they've been in the toilet. So really, I'm gonna give the Ducks a C tier trade deadline. This year, sorry. Next one, the Arizona Coyotes. Look, I mean, the Jacob Chychrun deal is the biggest one that comes to mind. They got fleeced in that deal. There's no denying that. Yes, they got a first-round pick, but they did get fleeced. There's also, like, the Decent Mayo deal. There's the Jacob Voracek deal as well. There's a Shane Gostisbehere deal. All of those deals, you could argue that they lost. Look, I don't think it was a bad deadline. It was kind of a bad deadline, but it wasn't a super. I'm gonna give them a D. Honestly, I'm not gonna try and defend it. They really did not have a good deadline. The first really bad deadline I've seen. They really should not have held out on Chychrun. That's the biggest issue. They shouldn't have held out on Jacob Chychrun. If they didn't, then honestly, like, they probably could have gotten back a pretty sizable return. Like, even if they traded him a week before they traded him, then. Like a week before he got traded, they could have gotten way more back in return than just 3 draft picks. So, overall, very good deadline for the Senators. Not a good deadline for the Coyotes, 100%. I don't know why I said very good. Boston. Yeah, Boston. I mean, like, there's really no question. I kind of wondered there for a second, just kind of throw y'all off. But I'm going to give them an A, 100%. Bruins had a very good deadline. They traded away a couple of their draft picks and really acquired some pretty asset players. Bertuzzi, really solid physical, solid goal scorer, will do very good for the Boston Bruins. You got Dmitry Orlov as well, too. And this is the thing with Orlov. Like, you had a couple options. You could have given him an absolute ton for Chychrun, or you could have given him a first-round pick for Gavrikov, who really, in all honesty, didn't deserve a first-round pick. So really, you kind of went for the middle part there. You got Orlov, and you also got a solid, really tall depth forward in Garnet Hathaway. So overall, really good deadline for the Bruins. 100% going to give them an A. Buffalo, another one of those teams that really didn't do much of anything. So overall, I'm also going to give the Buffalo a C. Their biggest move was probably that Rasmus Asplund deal, if we're being honest. But, like, apart from that, they really didn't do too much of anything. So, Buffalo, going to give them a C overall. The Calgary Flames up next. Calgary, I really didn't know what to expect from Calgary heading into this deadline. They were interested in James Van Riemsdyk. They were interested in a couple other players. They didn't make any moves, though, that were really eye-opening. Apart from, like, I guess, acquiring Troy Stecher and Nick Ritchie. Apart from that, and that as well, too, with the Coyotes. Apart from that, not really that big of a deadline from Calgary. So I'm honestly also going to put them in the D-level tier. Many Flames fans would argue that they would be an F, but I'm going to give them a D overall because they did make moves. They didn't just sit around and do nothing. They made moves. So I guess that means something. But apart from that, really not enough moves to put this team into the playoff push. they're likely going to miss this year, which is pretty unfortunate and pretty surprising comparatively speaking to last year. Carolina. There was a lot expected out of Carolina to do at this deadline. I don't really know why people expected a lot from them. Honestly, I didn't expect them to do much of anything, really. Mainly because of kind of just, the cap space. And then as well as that, too, a lot of the high prices for players. I don't know if Carolina was willing to give those up. However, they acquired a really solid defender in Shane Gostisbehere from Arizona for virtually nothing. Really just a third-round pick. That's a really good move there for Carolina. Honestly, if there was like a B+ tier, I'd give them that, but I'm going to give them a B tier. I can't solely give them an A off of that Shane Gostisbehere move, really. But overall, I think they had a very good deadline for Carolina standards. I didn't think they really had to do too much, to be honest with you. I thought they could just really stay put and overall have not that bad of a deadline. And really, that's kind of all they did. So good deadline for Carolina. Not A-level deadline, but still pretty solid overall. Next up, the Chicago Blackhawks. Blackhawks are a bit interesting. I mean, okay, look, the thing is with that is that they traded away McCabe, they traded away Kane. The thing you could argue, though, is they didn't get enough back for him. But I think if I'm right, they could have as high as 4 first-round picks in 2023 draft, which really could help their chances out for getting, really having a really good future. So overall, Chicago, I'm going to give a B-level trade deadline. Honestly, we could look back at this deadline and say that deadline was really what got this team to be a really good team overall in the next couple of years. But obviously, they traded away Kane, they traded away McCabe. They made a couple moves there as well, apart from that. But overall, not a horrible deadline. They still got some draft picks back in return. Colorado, the only move that I think they made was the Lars Eller trade, which really was not a bad move overall. I like Lars Eller will be a really solid, middle bottom six defender, forward for the Colorado Avalanche. I don't think their deadline was D level because really they didn't have to do much of anything. To be honest with you, they really had no expectations whatsoever heading into this deadline. They're a good team. They really could stay put, and still do well in the playoffs. So I'm honestly going to give them a C in this year's deadline. They didn't have an amazing deadline by any means, but they didn't have a bad deadline either. Just kind of in the middle, in my opinion. Columbus up next. Columbus, they traded away Voracek. They traded away Korpisalo and Gavrikov. They dealt away quick. They got some draft picks back in return. But really, you look at this deadline. Not that good of a deadline for Columbus. Didn't expect them to have that good of a deadline, really. So I'm also going to put Columbus in the C tier. Yes, they dealt away Gavrikov. Yes, they got a lot back in return. But really nothing too shocking there, in my opinion. Not really that good of a deadline for the Blue Jackets. I could be missing something, but just, in my opinion, not that good. Dallas. They made that 1-for-1 move with the Canadiens for Evgeny Dadonov. Solid secondary goal scorer, in my opinion. Then you also... I forget, they also made another move. The Max Domi deal as well. Apologies. Almost forgot about that. Solid deadline overall. I'm gonna give them a B, honestly. Not like an amazingly good deadline, but not a bad deadline either. So overall, gonna give them a D there, or a B, not a D. So yeah, Dallas, not that bad of a deadline. Detroit, they dealt away Tyler Bertuzzi. They dealt away Jacob Vrana. They made another move. I can't remember what the other move was, but overall, not a horrible trade deadline for Detroit. They almost got James Van Riemsdyk, which would have made me so happy, but they didn't. So overall, I'm gonna give Detroit I'm gonna give them a C. They didn't have that bad of a deadline by any means whatsoever. The Oilers, they finally went out and acquired a defenseman, and that's Matthias Ekholm. Definitely going to help out their top 4 on that defense. That's obviously been the biggest thing with Edmonton for the past couple of years. I'm very thankful they finally made an actual deadline move, so good for them there. Overall, I'm going to give the Oilers a B-tier trade deadline. Pretty solid deadline overall from them. Next up, the Florida Panthers. They really didn't do anything. I don't think they really did much of anything. Now that I come to think of it, I don't think they really did anything. To tell you the truth, I'm trying to think what move did they make? I really should have like written all these down before, but like I really can't think of a move that Florida's made. No, I don't think they made any moves. So I mean, like, could they really make any move? No, they don't have assets. They don't have much of anything. I'll give them a D overall, even though they did like nothing. They probably still could have done something because they're barely going to make the playoffs, even if they do make it. So yeah, overall, Florida's going to get a D from me. The Los Angeles Kings. Kings had an alright deadline. They got Gavrikov. They got a goalie in Korpisalo. The way they dealt away Quick was pretty shitty, but I mean, like, I don't know what people really expected. I know Quick was going to be gone. Anyways, so for LA, I'm going to give them I'll give them a B-level deadline because they got a solid defender in Gavrikov. I still don't think Korpisalo is their good long-term solution in net. This coming free agency, they really need to figure something out there. Maybe they need to go out and acquire someone. But yeah, overall, kind of just a B-level deadline. We reached the halfway mark with Minnesota. The Wild, honestly, if I'm Minnesota, they acquired Klingberg. They didn't make that bad of moves. They got Klingberg, they got Johansson, they got Nyquist. They wanted to add a forward to this year's trade deadline, and they kind of went the quantity over quality, which isn't a bad thing by any means. So we'll really see there how those players pan out with the Wild. But overall, I'll probably give them a C-level deadline. They didn't like do any like big moves, but these moves that they made, acquiring some of these forwards, could turn out pretty well for them, honestly. So we shall see there, obviously. But anyways, Montreal, the only move that I can think of that they made was the Dadonov deal. The 1-for-1 Dadonov trade. Apart from that, I don't think they did much of anything. I didn't expect them to do much of anything either, though, because honestly, like a lot of their players are hurt, so they really couldn't do anything regardless. But yeah, Montreal, probably going to give them a C-level deadline there. It wasn't because like they couldn't do it. It wasn't because like they didn't want to do anything. It's because they really couldn't. They didn't have like any players they could move apart from Dadonov. So overall, not that bad of a deadline there for the Habs. Going to give them a C, but it wasn't amazing either. Moving on now with the Nashville Predators. The Predators, they had a pretty good deadline, if I'm being honest. They sold a couple of their players. They got a lot back in return for Tanner Jeannot. Very good move there for them. They also made another move. I can't think of what the heck it was. They traded someone else away. I can't remember. I might be wrong, but apart from that, the only one that I can really think of that comes to my head is the Tanner Jeannot deal, which overall is a pretty solid trade by this Predators team. So honestly, I'm going to give them a B-level deadline. They got a lot back in return for Jeannot, and that's kind of why it's been a good deadline for them. They definitely have a brighter future ahead. They're going to be like in no man's land for the next couple of years, but overall, not that bad of a deadline. Devils, they didn't do much, but I'm going to give them an A. I'm honestly going to give the Devils an A. Solely because of how they got away with that Timo Meier deal. They got away with that so hard. Like, that was such a good deadline move for them. They got a really solid young forward there in Meier. But yeah, I can't say it enough. A really good trade for them overall. Definitely going to help them out when they make it to the playoffs. Islanders, they got Horvat. Apart from that, they really didn't do anything. Honestly, We'll put him in B because they got Horvat, a really solid offensive player. He's been okay for the Islanders so far. Apart from that, they really didn't do anything, but I guess that's kind of what we're going to wonder, whether or not they make the playoffs with that. We shall see, though. Rangers, there's really no question where the Rangers go. They're 100% going to be an A-tier team. They got Kane, they got Tarasenko, they got Mott. They didn't even give up a lot for him either, really. So overall, really good. Arguably the best deadline for the Rangers overall this year. 100% an A. We'll see how that pans out in the playoffs, though. We'll see if they can get past those teams like Carolina and that. If they do, we shall see. But overall, very good deadline there from the New York Rangers, 100%. Ottawa, I would love to give Ottawa an A, mainly because of how they fleeced the Coyotes for Chychrun, but I'm going to give them a B because I can't really give them an A just off of that only that move. But yeah, overall, getting Jacob Chychrun was their biggest trade acquisition. People wondered why they got him, but it was mainly because of Chychrun's term. Next year, with a fully healthy Ottawa Senators team, they will be insane. 100%. They will definitely make a push for the playoffs. If not, they'll make the playoffs 100%. Philadelphia. Yep, got the Flyers stuff on. You had one job. I'm definitely going to make it a video on the Flyers, just solely the Flyers. Same with the Canucks, too, very soon. But you had one job. You had one job. You had one job, and all you had to do was trade away some of your players. You had teams calling in on Provorov. You had teams calling in on James Van Riemsdyk. You had teams calling in on Kevin Hayes. Those are your three players with arguably the biggest cap hits. You could have gotten away with a lot, and maybe even not gotten away with a lot. You could have freed up so much cap space. It fails to seize how Chuck Fletcher still has a job, and that goes to show that Comcast doesn't give a shit. But yeah, Flyers overall probably the only team that I give an F so far, but like I can't with this team, man. Pittsburgh Penguins. As it goes for Pittsburgh, their moves were confusing, but they weren't bad moves. I'd give them a C overall. Wondering why they got Granlund was kind of a blank to me. Kulikov wasn't a bad move. Kulikov, a solid depth defenseman. Still don't know if this team will make the playoffs though off of that, if we're being fully honest. So, yeah, we're going to give them a C. San Jose, they traded away Meyer. They got some solid stuff back. They got a first. They got Muka Medulin, a pretty solid prospect. Apart from that, don't see that trade doing so well for San Jose. So overall, I'm going to give them a C. Honestly, they could have moved out a lot more players. Actually, no, I'm going to give them a D, to be honest with you. They could have moved out a lot more players. They could have moved out LeBanc. They could have moved out Couture. They could have moved out a lot more back instead of what they got. It ceases to amaze me how some of these teams, they could have done so much, but they didn't do anything. It's so stupid. Seattle, I'm going to give them a D as well. Look, Seattle didn't do anything, and that's the main reason why I'm giving them a D. They really didn't do much of anything. I can't think of what they did. And it kind of goes to show how like they were kind of falling off towards that trade deadline, so maybe they could have made a move, but they just chose to stay put, which isn't a bad thing necessarily because, honestly, like, Ron Francis has a lot of options. They still have a young future nonetheless, but still kind of wondering why they didn't make at least one trade deadline move. But overall, wasn't bad. St. Louis, I thought they made out pretty well with selling a lot of their players. They got a lot for O'Reilly. They got some back for Tarasenko. They got some back for Barbashev. Overall, probably a B-level deadline. They had a pretty good trade deadline overall, in my opinion. So yeah, pretty solid there. For the St. Louis Blues. Tampa, I know people beat them down to hell over the Tanner Jeannot thing. I'm going to give them a C, in my opinion. Mainly because, like, people complain about how they gave up so much for Jeannot. But honestly, Jeannot is one of those players that has that grit. They have that physicality. You don't see that too often in the NHL. I feel like I've said that everywhere in regards to the Jeannot deal. But overall, I still think it's a solid trade for Tampa. Even then though, they still give up a ton. So that's why I'm putting them in the C tier. But yeah, overall, not that bad of a deadline from Tampa. Toronto, obviously, not a B. I'm gonna give them an A as well. Toronto, really, they did a lot. They got O'Reilly, they got McCabe, they got Lafferty. They made a couple other moves there as well. So overall, I think this was a pretty solid trade deadline. From Toronto. They're definitely going all in for that trade, for that first round, and trying to get past. But we'll see if that even happens. I hope it does, honestly. I hope Toronto finally gets over that hump. Vancouver, I'm also going to give an F, because really, they gave up Horvat. Okay, so like they gave up Horvat. They got a lot back in return for him. They actually made out pretty good in that trade. Then they dealt it away for Hronek. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And then as well as that too, They could have given away Miller to Pittsburgh. And honestly, if that was the case, Pittsburgh would be down here. Like, Miller is a great, solid offensive player, but he's on a way too big of a contract, and he's a locker room cancer as well. You could have traded him away, but you didn't. I can't process that, honestly. Such a horrible, horrible deadline. from Vancouver. They could have made out pretty well with just the Bo Horvat deal, and then they just traded it away for Hronek. Like, oh my goodness. And then you have Vegas there as well. They got Jonathan Quick. They didn't do much of anything, really, apart from that. They got Barbashev back, too. I'll give them a C. Vegas, overall, not that bad of a deadline. Washington, honestly, I'm going to give them an A. They had a very good job at selling. Honestly, they got some draft picks back in return. They got a pick back from Toronto, which was Boston's pick. Sorry. They got a pick back from Toronto, which I think was... Yeah, I actually think it was one of Toronto's picks. I feel like they gave up Boston's pick, though. But overall, they also got Sandin back, too, in that trade. Oh, wait, sorry. I'm an idiot. They traded away that pick to Toronto in exchange for Sandin. I'm actually so stupid. I don't know why that didn't process in my head. My fault, guys. But yeah, Capitals overall had a pretty solid deadline, in my opinion. They acquired a really solid young defender in Sandin. They also got some draft picks back in return. Personally, I like that deadline for Washington. Jets. Jets I'm going to give a C because they got Niederreiter. But apart from that, they really didn't make any other moves. So yeah, those are my deadline tier rankings. Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching. For all of your supporters, I really do appreciate it. Subscribe down below if you are new. And yeah, we'll make some other deadline-related videos. Probably, I want to make a video on the Flyers. I'll make a video on the Canucks. We still got a couple other videos to make on some teams. And as well as that, too, teams are going to start clinching, which means clinch videos are going to return. So, yeah, make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.